Fanatic About the Playoffs, recapping Game 2, looking ahead to Game 3. Tremendous to be joined by two dignitaries in the audio space. Tom McGinnis, you know him, of course, and hometown product John Kincade from The John Kincade Show, mornings on our flagship station, 97.5 The Fanatic. Gentlemen, hello. John, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to see Tom, too. I said I've been wanting to meet Tom McGinnis since I came home, so I'm very excited. And Brian, good chance to see you. We're getting out of the pandemic, and we've got a Sixers run to unite the whole city and to get everybody excited about.
I'll be honest. I think T-Mac knows this. I don't usually make declarative statements, bold statements, anything like that. It is hard for me not to feel very confident after what we saw in Game 2. Now, I know that going on the road is a different thing, but to me right now, this is almost not so much about the adjustment conversation with the Wizards. I think the 76ers, they've got the talent. Like Washington, if they're going to have a shot, they got to play better. I thought that was a great win by the Sixers to really psychologically take an advantage in the series on Wednesday night.
Is that to me, Brian? I would say so only because they don't have the answers, right? Like they're trying to double Joel, and Alex Len would have the size, but in general, they don't really have the size, not just with Embiid, or the schemes for them aren't working. The double teaming's not working. And then, relative to the size as well, like Ben was so aggressive, even over Westbrook, who's an incredible athlete. But then, I can still in my mind see Bradley Beal, like putting his arm bar on Ben's hips, and Simmons has got like 7 or 8 inches on him. He's just going over the top of him and powering in. So, the talent of the Sixers trumps that of the Wizards. And, Beal's had 33 points in both games. And, as you said last night on the radio, Brian, anybody but theory in terms of, let Beal get his baskets, which, oh, by the way, I think he's going to get him anyway. But here he was with 33 points, and he was minus 28. So their best player had a tremendous offensive game, but was in there in the guts of the game when the Sixers dominated Washington. So to your point about going down there, as much as the Sixers have dominated Washington here in Philadelphia, which I believe numbers now 11 consecutive wins and 5 straight this season overall, including the 1 win there, the Sixers have not excelled there. And going on the road in the playoffs is a whole different animal, but a good test, because if the Sixers are going to get where they need to go, they're obviously going to have to win at home. Now, you would say, well, wait a minute. The formula says they could just win all their home games in the East and get to the finals, but you got to steal some wins, and you want to take care of business when you have a team on the ropes, and that's what lies ahead. But the first 2 games, particularly last night, I thought the Sixers played well, and when these guys played 25, 29, 27 minutes, they put the game away, which is great to see.
Brian, I think, though, the T-Mac did not address the elephant in the room, the selfish play last night of Ben Simmons. That selfish guy scoring. When can we see this guy stop shooting so much? I'm tired of it. He's a selfish guy. He's all about his points, all about – wait a minute. That's the argument people were calling me with the other day, that he didn't do that. I was shocked last night because I love seeing that Ben Simmons, the aggressive Ben Simmons. But I marvel, since I've been home, that in any way this young man is a polarizing figure. Because I guess watching him most of his career from afar before I returned home, I just tend to marvel at his skill set and what he brings. And I love watching great defense. But last night was the complete game out of Ben Simmons. That was a fun performance last night.
Let's get right into that. The main difference maker. Ben Simmons, right off the bat, sets the tone. He equals his point total on a perfect 3 for 3, less than halfway through the first quarter. John, I thought it was totally poetic. It was like, yes, he can make a basket. And it totally set the tone for the game.
I love the fact, though, that the young man has a game where he makes other players better. And on the defensive end, I always say, is there a night that I don't see Ben Simmons bring it? I always see a strong – his B game defensively is better than most players' A game. So to me, again, I'm confounded by the fact that people will call sports radio. It's one of the reasons we maybe don't take as many calls, is to hear people talk about what he's deficient at. I'd rather talk about what he's really, really good at. and he is a difference maker. And I believe defense travels, T-Mac. And going on the road, if I know that my team can clamp down on people defensively, I think I feel better about their chances on the road.
Yeah, what's really impressed me, certainly this year and last year too, and even going back further, he guarded Leonard in the playoffs, but he really gets into people. One of our assistant coaches in years past who ended up coaching the Hawks, Lloyd Pierce, used to say, make them feel you. And that's what, like Simmons, like he's getting up on people. It reminds me of like how Gary Payton guarded, where he's taking away your space, and yet he's so athletic that he's able to be up there and be physical and make them feel him, but at the same time able to move laterally and back up, and so that he's not fouling. And it's just, and then there's a lot to it, but his athletic gifts and his want, right? His fight, his desire, his grit. Not a lot of guys want that. It's like in basketball, teams like, oh yeah, we want to run. Yeah, coach, let's be that style. What coach doesn't say we're going to run, right? When a guy gets a job, you hear at any level, college, we're going to run and we're going to play defense. Oh, there's a novel concept. But when you really get into it, you got to run. It takes a lot of effort to fill the wings and get out and run. And Simmons, does that on offense. He leads the break. That's not my point. The point is defensively, he's getting after it. And as you say, on nights when you're not scoring or the team's lackluster, defense matters. And defense, you can show up and put forth the effort that makes a huge impact at that end of the floor.
Listen, there are things about this sport that no matter how much I watch it, I'm never going to understand. And I think one of the great things that Doc Rivers has brought this season is even when he's communicating to the public, he makes things sound so simple. And when he was talking about Ben Simmons' game after game 2 on Wednesday night, he was talking about, listen, we scored 125 points game 1. We dropped 120 in game 2. That's 245 points in the first 2 games. He's like, we're scoring points. That's all I care about. That means that Ben is doing something to promote that just by virtue of Ben's game, whether he's putting the ball in the basket directly himself like he did in game 2 or facilitating like he did in game 1. 245 points in the first 2 games of playoff series. That's great.
Absolutely awesome. And isn't that what we're expecting in this series, that this was not going to be a high-stress series? Now, look, I don't expect sweeps in every series. This is, as Tom talks about, this is a team that doesn't have a great run in D.C. playing down there. And you find that with teams. But to me, if you can just be efficient, win the first series in 5, win a second series in 5. We did a little study on our show about how the average champion in the NBA plays 11 games in their first 2 series. So in the modern era of since the playoffs have expanded to what they are, if you play 11 games, the average champion's what they play in the first 2 rounds. So just be efficient. Get through your series, do all the things. And I can't wait to see this Sixers team on the road and how they answer it. Because when a team that has a really, really good offensive game gets home, sometimes the crowd can help to elevate that.
That's what we call a deep dive.
Yes. See?
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I got to keep up with Bob Cooney. You see, I'm constantly trying to Cooney helps my basketball IQ so much on a daily basis. So I'm always trying to say, if I can get Bob Cooney to say, wow, I didn't know that about basketball, I always feel like it's a win.
That sounds like me after 3 holes in golf. Like I've been golfing since I was 8. I'm like, I lie 15 again.
There you go.
Nothing's changed. And then Brian, to your point about the 245, that sounds like the over-under, which we seem to get from every quarter of sports and the like, if you will, if you know what I mean. But no, I love that about what Coach has said. And that's basically been like the mantra for the year. And that is whether we should make 14 threes or whatever. And that is just win and get better and improve and move the needle and develop to your potential throughout the course of the year. And I think one element to that during this, there's been a lot of breathing room, right? I mean, the Sixers played their second game in 11 days, and that first week was different because of the whole play-in, but even the Sunday, Wednesday, and now Saturday thing. And like by way of example, as we speak, today's a film session and rest and recovery. Guys are going to probably get shots up, but I think the team can actually get better during this time. I mean, it's like a college basketball team who plays in the NIT. Well, the coaches are loving it because they get to still practice, right? I mean, it's not whether, obviously you want to get to the final and whatever, the NCAA, but you get the practice time for your young players. You still get to develop and work on things. And to that end, I think the Sixers, rest, recovery, film study, practice, a little bit of practice, all of this as you try to get to the ceiling that'll give yourselves the best team and the best opportunity to actually compete for a championship.
One more thing about Ben before we move on. I feel like he's handled all the outside noise great. And it hasn't just been the last 48, 72 hours. I mean, remember earlier in the season, there was chatter about the president of basketball operations, former franchise, and where a certain player might go and all that. And I think Ben has stood up there, handled things really professionally. I loved his quote after last night. He's not trying to stick it to anybody. He just wants to go out there and try and win a championship. I think that on the surface, who knows what's happening behind the scenes, but I think he's put out a really good public tone.
I love the when athletes, embrace their community, but this is going to be the strangest thing you ever hear from a radio host. I hope none of them are listening to sports talk radio till the day of the parade, because I hear the most nonsensical things on a daily basis, and many, many times, sometimes they've been known to slip out of my mouth. So just steer clear of it, guys. Get in your bubble. This time free to move around, and just stay focused on it. It's exciting.
Well, I would think so. And, you've definitely heard of stories. I know Chris Paul, I think LeBron, get off social media at this time. But I would think certainly in this era, not just this year, this month, this week with Ben Simmons, but just in general, you got to block out the noise. And, with the WMI, you got to keep what's most important. And, athletes, a lot of their time, and especially now where they're precluded from going certain places because of the guidelines and whatnot, you got to stay with your loved ones and your friends and your family. And hopefully those people can help keep it real for you also. But boy, there's just too much out there. And I don't even really go there, but I just know because you have to remain confident. Like you think back to Iverson, what did he call himself? He called him the greatest player there was. And you can start to quibble, but that doesn't matter. That was the athlete's mindset. That's the psyche of an athlete. There's nobody does it better. And if, these guys got to trick themselves a little bit. It's a mental thing where you have to be a conqueror. You can't, I tried to say the word passivity when you were asking me prior to the game last night, Brian, would Joel be aggressive? You have to be aggressive because if you're not, you're going to get swarmed. So you have to have an athlete a mindset of I'm a monster truck and I'm going to squish everybody in my path.
Speaking of the big fella, the MVP candidates, he said after the game, he feels like things are slowing down. It's looking like it. And yeah, he put up some really nice scoring numbers, 22 and under 27 minutes. But even though he only had 3 assists, I thought he really helped promote some great ball movement that Doc Rivers talked about after the games. Him making the right reads is, I think, just as imperative at times as him scoring the basketball. And he was great, and he saw a lot of multi-wizard man coverage last night.
Johnny?
Yeah, I wonder whether Doc wants it to be more like game 1 or game 2. I love the idea that I like it when things run through Joel Embiid. I mean, to me, I see him as the cheat code that no other team has an answer for. So I always want to see it run through Embiid. But then Sunday afternoon, what did the officials do? They took him out of a game. And Tom, I heard some of your calls in post game, but I was shocked that first game was officiated like that, because that would intimidate me as an NBA head coach to wondering, am I going to get that in a big critical game on the road? Like Doc's got to be wondering, are they going to, during game 3 and game 4 on the road, are they going to officiate like that? Am I going to be caught shorthanded early on? It's a very difficult navigation game that these coaches got to work as far as who's working the games. And I'm saying that as an O'Hara grad where almost every single referee in the NBA is from my high school. So believe me.
No, it's tough, but I think it still holds true today. Like it wasn't just fouls in that game. There were a lot of travel calls that weren't called. So you have to navigate above that. You almost have to account for that. And look, these guys, this is such a difficult job. And we're all, I always remember and John, you would probably, but the Flyers, the referee, I don't know, in some Montreal series in the 70s, Leon Steckel or whatever.
Oh, that was the 80 Stanley Cup Finals Game 6. Not that we remember. The offside goal that he missed.
I wasn't even here, but that guy's name is stuck in my craw.
Still mud.
So, as fans, and I'm sure football fans could say this, that, or the other about some NFL referee, but look, our guys and the training and the everything that's gone through with the NBA referees and the program and everything they've implemented, they're trying to get better and better. But obviously, it's part of it, whether they're good or bad or this or that. Or that. Look, the foul on Joel, and Doc said it last night pregame. It was a foul. It was a ticky-tack foul. It was the first foul that he had against Alex Len, and that started things going. But that's what happens. You had two players last night sprain their ankles, Westbrook for them, and Curry and Harris for the Sixers. Foul trouble. You just never know. And that's why you kind of have to block it out thing and just do what you do well. And going on the road is tough. I mean, like, here's another thing. And I used to say this, like, in other words, if you win the first game in a playoff series on the road, you are not winning that second game. It's just kind of, there's almost like and I say this somewhat facetiously, there's like an unwritten memo, but it's just that difficult, right? So it's going to be hard, to be sure. But just back to Embiid a little bit, and he's the last guy out there that shoots around prior to going into the locker room. So he's got Chris Babcock, he's got Dwayne Jones, Andrew's working with them, and they were showing him a lot of faces, jumping out at him, giving him the looks. It's like a steady diet of preparation for him to handle things. He's watching a lot of video and learning, and certainly all the hours that we don't see where he's sitting with coaches and in practice and whatnot in terms of handling traps, where it's coming from and whatnot. So it is constantly going to be, they work on it all the time. And it's still an evolution. He's not perfect. He still has turnovers and whatnot, but it's getting that ball out of the traps or being decisive or facing up, all the things that we've seen him do, he's going to continue to do. And the different devices or the way that the Sixers play him, whether they put him in the middle or face him up on the wing or put him on the block, and then also how teams play him is going to be something that'll change on a game-by-game, series-by-series basis. And he's got the talent. And now he's just got to solve the puzzle to help the Sixers play the best that they can play.
There may be some people out there that are just getting acquainted with the podcasting space. But one of the reasons that I knew of John Kincade before he came to Philadelphia was he's been doing podcasting for years with a gentleman by the name of Shaq, who I heard on your show. This guy, Shaq.
I've helped to raise his visibility. I've done a lot to – he was hardly known. I don't think anybody had ever heard of him before we worked together.
From obscure talent to megastar, you know?
I'm glad to share my stage with him a little bit over the years. I mean, it's just to give him some exposure. I mean, come on, the guy, you never see him anywhere. It's like a hermit.
Literally, you can't see him.
General ads.
He's like a hermit. The best part about it, though, is I believe we've gotten word that the TNT crew will travel in the Eastern Conference playoffs. And Shaq will come and do a live edition of the John Kincade show with us.
That's incredible.
We announced that the other day on the show. So as long as TNT travels, Shaquille O'Neal will co-host on the John Kincade show with the crew live here in Philadelphia. We just have to find the venue to put it in. We're thinking about the parking lot.
I like
actually that. Having a stage set up in the parking lot, we can more control the space. But Shaq is a amazing individual. And I tell everybody that a great blessing to have come into life. Thank you for Ernie Johnson Jr., who pointed Shaquille in my direction because we did not know each other. And he did not know that I lived in Atlanta at the time because he didn't listen to sports talk radio locally. And Ernie Johnson Jr. pointed him in my direction, and the rest is history. My 17-year-old has a Uncle Shaq. So I'd say that always makes you one of the most popular kids when Shaq will FaceTime you or something like that. It's big points, big dad points scored there. Is that with that?
That is so cool.
He loves the Sixers, by the way. He loves the Sixers. He loves what he's seen. He thinks Joel Embiid, and he's told us many times, he thinks Joel Embiid has answered the bell. Has taken his game to an entirely different level, taken his preparation to a new level, taken his attitude to a new level. snarky, the fierceness that he attacks things with. And when Shaquille's getting on younger players, people always say, oh, he's hating on the young guys. No, he wants to see them all be great. He doesn't care about one of his records being broken or anything like that. He wants to see the young players be great and make their money the way he makes money still today. So and he believes Joel Embiid has done just that.
That's what I was going to ask you about, because in listening to him on your show earlier this week, you can tell when you listen to him, and he's talked about this stuff on Inside the NBA on TNT as well. It's almost like a big brother thing where the expectation is set at such a high level because he has that much belief in what Joel can be. And this season, based on what Shaq's been saying, to what you just mentioned, John, it sounds like he really feels like it's all coming together for Joe.
No, he does. I mean, I got to sit down with Shaq and Kobe to do their first interview that they ever did together after they had been not united. Before they ever did the one for the NBA, I got to sit with both of them and do a long form podcast, and people can still find it out there, big podcast with Shaq. And Shaq understands the game. Like I said to them both, I said, who's to blame for your relationship being poor when you guys had a working relationship? And Shaq took 70% of the blame, and Kobe agreed with him, which I thought was funny. And he said, but he took his ownership of it. He wants to see the next generation do well. Like he's not hating on anybody, but he's going to push and he's going to prod and he's going to, get guys to try to be better. He has the utmost respect for Joel Embiid's game though. And he thinks there's a whole nother tier to it. And mornings too. My eyes aren't good enough, T-Mac, to say, like, you've seen the greatest up close and personal and different generations go through. I can't imagine that there's a whole nother level to Joel Embiid's game, because that is a frightening fact. And we're going to need multiple purchase for multiple parades if that ever happened.
That's great. No, he does. I mean, think about it. He hasn't played as much basketball as some of these guys, right? That started playing AAU when they were 10, 11 years old. Look, Joe and Brian, you talked to Bill Self. It's 10 years, a little bit more maybe. And then with that athletic skill set, he's right, and all those things that you talked about in terms of being in shape, the basketball IQ and the physical gifts and the desire to be great and to push your franchise toward the expectations of both yourself, the team, your teammates, the franchise itself, the community, the city. And so, and then when guys get a taste of that, they want more. And so let's hope. And I would not disagree. I agree. He has a high ceiling.
That's a great high ceiling, Brian. I don't know about you, but that's scary for the rest of the Eastern Conference.
We asked Doc Rivers that same question recently. Like, do you think this is it or there's another notch? He's like, oh, there's another notch. And when it gets to that point, goodbye, league.
Will that notch will that notch ever be, guys, where we see him play more frequently? Because it is something that I wonder about, the bubble wrap, the load management. It's something that, honestly, it annoys me as a fan, because I always think of the consumer and the guys who want to see the best players on a certain amount of games, and then teams just shut it down. And it's not just Joel Embiid, so I'm not just making it that. It is something about the NBA product I think that they need to address. There's too many nights where I'm fired up to see something on my couch or whatever, and then the product I get is, well, they're resting everybody tonight.
Right. Well,
that definitely happened down the stretch of the regular season across the board in the league, which was, for me, and listen, I'm not digging ditches, but it was the last 2 weeks of the regular season. It was hard because so many teams rested guys. I don't know what you were going to say, T-Mac. I felt like it was encouraging, to John, what you brought up, that Joe was available in back-to-backs this year, and we saw him in back-to-backs. And I think the ironic thing is that 10-game stretch that he missed, the more I think about it, I wonder if that was not one of the best things that could have happened to this team, because they gained confidence that, at least in years past, I don't think they had, that they figured out how to win without him out there.
I would say yes and yes, clearly. And this year was different, right? Because the league has made strides and made efforts to spread out the schedule. We used to play 4 games in 5 nights routinely, particularly for the Sixers. Their second West Coast trip was almost always that. and obviously, it came to a head like a 3 years ago when all of a sudden the network games didn't have the top stars, and the league heard about it, I would think, from the sponsors and from those networks, and they weren't delivering the top players. And so they have spaced out the schedule. But again, this year was an anomaly because it was shrunk into 5 months, even though they reduced it by 10 games. And to Brian, to your point, like for Joel, he's been hurt a lot of these times. Now, load management is not going away, right? Sports science deems that, whatever the whole numbers and whatnot that go into all that, that part's not going away. And so, and these guys are unbelievable cornerstone pieces to franchises. So they're going to protect their athletes, and health and safety of the players is always going to be paramount, and it should be. But to your point, everybody, I think, would concur, John, in that you want to see, when you tune in on Saturday night, the prime time on ABC, you want to see the combatants and the competition you hope to see. And that's what's been billed and whatnot. But I would think so. But, the days of Karl Malone, 82, 81, 80, Michael Jordan, 80, 82.
LeBron James, though, does it.
Yeah. I don't know that you're going to see that as much, and we're not, frankly.
Right.
But it's certainly a legitimate, concern that you have, because, like you said, you want to see the best of the best compete against each other whenever they're going head to head.
Brian, we had Mark Cuban on the Shaq podcast, and I was pressing him for things. I said, I make you commissioner. And he goes, well, that'll never happen. But he was along the lines of, and he said, first of all, he said, I've been pushing forever. He said, I want the league to start on Christmas, and I want to own the summer. And I want to have our championship be in August before football season ends. And he was like, we'll bury them. We'll bury them head to head. And he wanted the whole stage. And he said he wanted the whole stage to himself, but he wanted them to start at Christmas. So it would be like Christmas week is when the NBA kicks off. I wonder what we're going to see as a season next year. Like when they are going to, if they push this thing back, and I hope they do. The players need more rest. This last offseason honestly was a little bit of a joke, the amount of time that they gave them to bounce back. But the players wanted the money. The owners wanted the money. And so this is what we got.
Well, I can tell you right now, the schedule is going to be the same. I mean, Adam Silver has said he wants to get back to a normal schedule.
So they're going to start like Halloween?
Well, that's typically what's happened. Everything this year was predicated on the Olympics. That's why there was a hard out for July 26th. The first thing the NBA does every year is set the schedule, and everything falls off that. And so to your point, and like I said, I interrupted, I apologize, but like Mark Cuban got his wish the last 2 years. It is going into this summer, and obviously with the restart last year. I think with the NBA, and this is not a novel concept, but they don't want to go head-to-head with the National Football League. And so in summer, I mean, I think traditionally basketball is a winter sport. So we'll see. But, look, the eyeballs are going to be on for the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And, the NBA, there's so many great storylines, and it's going to be must-see TV, and the Sixers are right at the center of that.
That's awesome. That's just awesome. I'm a selfish guy. I want to be able to come to work every day and talk about a championship run. I want to talk about drama the night before. What are we complaining about? What are we excited about? So I am a selfish guy. Just get me all through the summer with a great storyline, and I'm all for it.
The NBA has drama. That's for
there.
Sure.
It is. We want the drama too.
All right, guys. As we wrap this up, what can change? What changes for Game 3? I don't know. If you're the Sixers, that's not just a Wizards question. We can go around the horn. What could change? What could the Sixers do better? And what's got to happen for the Wizards if they want a shot at this thing?
John, you go.
I love the defensive approach the Sixers have taken in this series, and I think T-Mac said it earlier about sort of like the Bradley Beal's going to get his. I'm totally fine with that, and they've frustrated the hell out of Brian Westbrook, Russell Westbrook. They've frustrated him in a big way. I hope that frustration continues, because I wonder about the fight in him if the Sixers can get up big in Game 3, if that team has it in them, or whether they start thinking about where their vacations are the week after. I think Game 3 is it. Put the foot on the throat. Come away with a victory, and I would almost guarantee it'll be a sweep.
Well, for one thing, what could change is they're not going out. I don't ever question the competitive drive of Russell Westbrook. And he could play better. I mean, he was 2 of 10 last night. Now, as
the frustration is more is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And it hinges on his health too, right? He's got to have, his game is based on explosiveness. And if his ankle is less than 100%, so we'll see. But at Bertans, fouls out, no threes. I mean, the guy had 8 threes against us a couple of years ago, so he's totally capable. And they're going to come out with a fire. And then, I think it's to the Sixers too. We talked about jump on them, but match that energy. And at some point, Washington's going to make a run. And the thing about it, like Doc Rivers talks about, there are no accidental champions. You're not going to back into a title, and that's for who you play down the road. But it could be boiled down into a micro thing where, in a given game, you're going to meet a challenge. It's not going to be given to you. You're going to have to earn it. And winning on the road in the playoffs is that. You have to meet that challenge and overtake them. This game might come down to the wire, and it all gets down to execution and doing what's necessary to, maximize your possessions and score when it matters and get stops. And so we'll see. I mean, it's one thing that I like, and I talked about the gap in the schedule. It's now you decelerate a day of film today, and then you get down there tomorrow, and then you build back up a crescendo. It's almost like a mini version of an NFL schedule with the way these days in between, and that'll change a little bit as the series goes on. But I think for the Sixers, that bodes well. And for Washington, they got to stew a little bit with kind of a lot of the elements that we talked about where they've been deficient. So it's going to be exciting. But obviously, by Memorial, as the clock turns on the holiday weekend, we'll know where this thing is going.
Brian, I want to know, though, before we get out of here, what about the wine? And is that champagne over Tom's right shoulder? Does he keep the good stuff out public so his guests see it?
That's funny.
Or is that office booze? No, I'm just wondering. Is it I'm trying to figure this out.
I don't even drink. So the wine
what is that?
The Sixers, that 1983 vintage, right, Brian?
Uh-huh.
And then the even funnier part is there's one of those cocktail shakers that's never had liquid in it. So
wow,
the built-ins have to have something built into them. That's
Brian. We can come on over and help him clear off his shelves if you.
Very true. I'll show you what I have stashed. What I have stashed on my cabinet next to my position is my wife's a speech language therapist, and I have a tub full of animal puppets. So I think T-Mac's
animal puppets.
I would have IPAs, though. Seltzers would have
right.
a bunch of different beer, craft beer, baby.
Brian, what I think we need is if the Sixers have a big gap, like if I saw today where if the Hawks and the Knicks go 7 games, the Sixers next games wouldn't begin till June 8th. I think we need to have a special day after puppet show, like where the puppet. I mean, just think about it. I'm not to program for you. I'm just think about it.
Fanatic About the Playoffs Puppet Edition. Right
there you
here.
go.
We'll re-rack this panel.
Don't write it off. It's there's no stupid ideas, just stupid people that offer them.
This is great, John. Pleasure virtually speaking with you for the first time. Everyone, you can check out his show mornings on 97.5, 6 to 10. Not just saying this because he joined us. It is authentic quality radio. It's not forced. I really, I've enjoyed listening.
We're having some fun. I got a great crew too. Great crew.
Yep.
It's fun.
T-Mac.
That's awesome. T-Mac's he's get excited.
I'm evenings.
We play that every morning.
I'm evenings on 97.5.
There he is. We play it every morning. Get excited because we're excited about this run. Thanks, Brian. Thanks there, T-Mac. Look forward to seeing you soon.